먼저 짐부터 돈 힘이 장하고는 문음 짐보는 게다 다그러다간 잔도 심어도 tumba 되지 잔라기 좀서.
To benefit beings, please generate bodhicitta before teaching. Today we're going to talk about the classic of filial piety. Relatively speaking, maybe a lot of people don't pay much attention to it, not like they do with Mahayana Buddhism, but I think its content is almost the same as that of Mahayana Buddhism. Perhaps every teaching can be of some help to each person. Earlier, we've already covered the content above Chapter 8. Today, we'll begin with Chapter 9, the governance of the sage. Here, the character sage probably refers to other sages or masters. In Buddhism, sages usually refer to bodhisattvas, that is, at the first bhumi and above. But here, the revered sages that Confucius deeply admired at that particular time, the kind of people he respects, those who are like sages in his eyes, such as the ancient King Wen of Zhou and the Duke of Zhou, these are the kind of people who, whether in terms of governing the world, benefiting the people greatly, being truly filial to their parents, they truly excelled in every single aspect. So he effectively used the profound example of a wise sage to govern the entire country and meticulously manage his own family. This particular kind of insightful reasoning might be discussed in more detail here. Today's section might have a bit more content. I'm not sure if we can finish it all today. If we can't finish, we can just cover a little bit less. That is perfectly fine too. Tomorrow we will still be talking about a precious garland of the supreme path. As for what we're discussing here today, we'll also start by using a question and answer format. Zhengzi said, "May I respectfully ask, is there no virtue greater than filial piety for a wise sage?" Here, Zhengzi, in his role as a devoted disciple, respectfully asks this profound question. "May I ask" means he is asking somewhat boldly, or you could say, in a casual manner. The virtue of a sage, the moral character of a sage, he asks Confucius, "May I be so bold as to ask this question? Is it true that the virtue we speak of in a sage, that there is nothing that surpasses filial piety? Is there nothing that goes beyond it?" Jiayu means to truly surpass, right? There is absolutely nothing that surpasses filial piety, nothing more profoundly important than filial piety, because the virtues of a sage are truly countless. There are so very many of them. But among them, isn't filial piety the most important, the one we most need to learn? That's precisely why he first raises this significant question, because when a truly wise person asks a profound question and another equally wise person thoughtfully answers it, then for all future generations, you could genuinely say, even after the passage of many, many years, it still remains exceptionally beneficial for people. Perhaps when Zhengzi thoughtfully asked this profound question and Confucius wisely answered it, people in that particular era might not have truly valued it so much, whether it was ordinary people throughout the world or especially some prominent religious figures within various religions. When we read many of their biographies, we often see that each and every one of them was not particularly popular or widely accepted in the world at that specific time. This is because if a truly wise sage, or indeed an important person, is actively alive and present in the world, their various competitors, for example, or those who felt jealous of him and slandered him, there were actually quite a lot of such people. And at that time, people might not have recognized his most important wisdom and spirit. But once he sadly passed away, then it seems that people began to value the crystallization of wisdom he left behind even more. So here, he raised a particularly important and significant question in advance. Such questions and answers are not only found in Confucianism, for example, in Buddhism. At the very beginning of every scripture, it is very likely that Shariputra, Modgalyayana, Manjushri Bodhisattva, and also Subhuti, they each posed an important question, and then the Buddha proceeded to provide an answer. Following this process, these resulting dialogues were naturally transformed into the immensely valuable teachings and instructions of the enlightened ones, which is something we all know. In Confucianism as well, Zhengzi would ask such questions. After asking these questions, Confucius would answer like this: of all the natural order, humanity is the most valuable. Of all human conduct, filial piety is the best. Of filial piety, revering one's father is the best. Of revering one's father, offering sacrifice is the best. So such a person is like the Duke of Zhou. His way of asking questions is also quite interesting, isn't it? He raised such a question, asking whether among virtues of sages, filial piety is most important. If someone else were to ask us this, we might not know how to answer. Everyone can think about this as well. Because we are currently studying the classic of filial piety, if someone were to ask, among all the virtues of sages, is filial piety the most important? Or, in other words, if we look at the teachings of sages from the perspective of Buddhism, is filial piety also the most important among the teachings of all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas? It depends on how we ourselves would answer. So how should this question be answered? At that time, Confucius answered in this way as well. In fact, every time he responded, first of all, it's best if we don't look at this with a biased perspective, like thinking, oh, this is just traditional culture, or this is just superstition, or thinking this is something very distant from us now and has no real significance. Don't think that way. We should try to put ourselves in the mindset of people from 2,500 years ago. It's like when we watch a historical drama in the modern world, maybe some aspects including their clothing, though I actually haven't watched many dramas myself. I could probably count on one hand, perhaps just one hand, how many I've actually watched in my entire whole life. Maybe just a very few, indeed very few. I clearly see that some of you watch them every single day. Some teachers I know and some Buddhists I know, if you ask them to memorize a treatise, they find it extremely painful. If they have to complete 500,000 preliminary practices, they feel especially distressed. But when it comes to watching dramas, they're always waiting eagerly, waiting to see which movie or which drama series is coming out. No matter how many episodes there are, it's never a problem for them. They won't eat, drink, or sleep and show the greatest diligence. I think if some people could apply that kind of dedication to practicing Buddhism, maybe they wouldn't necessarily attain Buddhahood, but they would at least achieve something by now. But sometimes when I watch, especially those ancient costume dramas, or some that are historical, whether they're from Tibet or elsewhere, but actually some Tibetan dramas, what they portray is also, because we understand some Tibetan customs and ways of life, and then they use other people, whether foreigners or people from other parts of China. Sometimes when they really act, their directors and the entire whole production team also might not truly and fully understand the rich history and cultural customs very well at all. So as we watch, sometimes we even get a bit angry. We truly feel that actually our people are not like that at all. In fact, Buddhism itself isn't like that either. So we just really don't want to keep watching this. It feels truly and deeply uncomfortable. That's precisely how it is. Of course, we ourselves aren't particularly familiar with some aspects of Han Chinese culture either. But no matter what, when watching, we should remind ourselves, I am a person from that particular era, whether it was the clothing worn by people of any status at that specific time, or the way they express themselves in their language, and indeed many other significant aspects. Back when we were in school, we had also read some of those in our younger days, so-called Journey to the West and Dream of the Red Chamber. We had read some of them. At this point, firstly, you need to position yourself and remind yourself, I am a person from that era. Only then can you get a bit of the feeling. Otherwise, you won't be able to fully grasp it. So we'll just keep thinking this doesn't fit with the present, or that doesn't match our way of doing things, or that our particular way of thinking simply doesn't align. This kind of limited perspective might not be very reasonable or entirely fair. It's precisely the same situation here as well. Just now, he thoughtfully asked what filial piety truly is. Is filial piety indeed the most important virtue among all virtues? Confucius answered yes. Among all things in heaven and earth, the nature of heaven and earth, humanity is the most precious. Humans are indeed the most important, the most valuable beings. Whether it's the vast material world, or the intricate sentient world, or the expansive natural world, the diverse animal world, or the complex human world, among all these natural things, all things in the universe, and all living beings, humans are the most precious. Of course, some people might think that this is what traditional culture, including Confucius, has always said. Among all things in heaven and earth, the nature of heaven and earth, humanity is the most precious. We humans should be the masters of heaven and earth. Humans are the masters of all nature. You could say humans are the spirits of all things. We humans have the inherent right to indeed control, or even to kill our own, or exterminate all animals, or even the natural world itself, to completely destroy everything. that we inherently possess this fundamental right and this inherent ability. This particular kind of thinking is actually a common misconception, a significant misinterpretation. What is truly meant here by the profound statement, humanity is the most precious, is that among all the things in heaven and earth, humans have a certain guiding ability. Humans also have the ability to create and the ability to think, and we can possess an altruistic spirit and sense of responsibility. It's not simply because humans possess powerful weapons, nor is it solely due to the fact that humans have relatively advanced science and technology. For this reason, apart from humans, everything else should be killed or made extinct. To think this way is wrong. It should be said that among all the countless things in existence, humans actually possess the remarkable ability to bring profound happiness to the entire world and can truly provide both temporary and ultimately enduring methods of liberation to others, including the fact that humans have the ability to help others. Humans are precious. Humans should have abilities, just as it is stated in the words of my perfect teacher, which mentioned that no matter how dull a person may be, they can still recite the Avalokiteshvara mantra and so on. There's really no problem with this. But as for animals, even the most intelligent and truly remarkable among them, these creatures, if you ask them to recite the Avalokiteshvara mantra, they simply cannot do it. If it is truly about to freeze to death today, it doesn't even possess the ability to gather firewood and make a warming fire for itself. So from this particular perspective, humans may now be the undisputed masters of the entire world. But if a single person tragically dies and is subsequently reborn as an animal, then in the cycle of vengeance, at that time you may also become food for the master. So in this particular regard, other religions also provide us with this kind of profound teaching, offering some explanations that are not particularly scientific. So as humans, we can eat all other animals. These other animals, some religions genuinely believe they are specifically provided for us humans to consume and eat. If that's the case, it's just a simple way of explaining profound things to us. In actual reality, they truly have absolutely no understanding at all of each and every sentient being, the deep feelings of their hearts, their personal experiences of happiness and suffering. So nowadays, some people, including some university professors in our world today, some often ask whether killing is inherently wrong or whether we should consume meat at all. Actually, these aren't really questions that necessarily need to be decided through extensive research. As long as a person possesses even a little bit of wisdom, we should understand the profound preciousness of life. There's really nothing more to research about that. Whether it's the life of an animal or a human, it is indeed extremely precious. If you need research and academia to understand its value, perhaps humanity is still quite backward and our thinking hasn't really progressed. So sometimes, whether it's non-Buddhists or others, some people are always holding seminars and doing academic research. And when they truly discuss such profound topics, it actually seems quite laughable, almost absurd. We should genuinely approach all things in this vast world with a heart full of compassion and deep, sincere care. This indeed is very, very important. This isn't something that can be solved through purely academic means alone. We humans shouldn't think that among all things under heaven, humans are the most precious. So we humans often indeed think that we can simply kill all of everything else. Actually, this is extremely unreasonable, including when we perform animal releases, indeed as Buddhists. Improper animal releases are not correct, and unscientific animal releases are not correct. But if we do release animals, some people often say that we shouldn't do animal releases. Otherwise, the money spent on releasing animals just increases the income of butchers. In this way, it's actually quite unreasonable and even sinful. There are indeed such opinions as well. But if we observe with wisdom, the amount of animal releases we do is actually very small. You see, perhaps in 100 days or even in a single week, we only do it just once. And each time we release these animals, the total number is not that large. But what truly and significantly increases their income? It's the consumption of meat, a staple. You eat it every single day at every single meal. If you consume it at every meal, when you eat, do you actually pay them for it? It's impossible not to pay them. So in this case, not only do you kill, but you also pay them. Many people in the world truly think it's only natural for me to just simply eat, They believe there's nothing wrong with eating meat, but instead that releasing animals is a problem. If some researchers say this, it might not be tenable, because according to some certain views in the Shurangama Sutra, those who kill sentient beings and those who eat meat both have the same degree of wrongdoing. This is found in both the Mahayana Shurangama Sutra and the Nirvana Sutra. Therefore, I must address this point with everyone here. Currently, we hold humanity as the most valuable. Humans certainly surpass animals in terms of wisdom, ability, and many other aspects. However, if we take this as a reason to disregard everything among the myriad beings of the world, destroying everything that can be destroyed and killing everything that can be killed, then we humans ourselves at a certain point will inevitably experience the consequences of these actions. Sometimes we see natural and man-made disasters happening one after another nowadays. When these things keep happening, I sometimes really think this way. Right now, people all over the world in every direction are creating extremely frightening negative karma. In ancient times, people might occasionally eat some animals, but now people all over the entire world, not just in a mere few cities. It's precisely the same situation in America, and it's also the same in Africa. Even in the Nordic countries, sometimes when we thoughtfully ask, did you truly used to consume so many live creatures before in the past? Including things like seafood, such as frogs, snakes, and so on. Many of them say, in the past we never did things like this. But now, because everything is so convenient, with transportation, communication, and shipping all being so easy, in the past, people living on land might have only slaughtered cows and sheep. And aside from that, they didn't actually eat that many animals from the sea. But now, because everything is so incredibly convenient and available, every meal involves taking so many lives. Everyone indeed knows the reason for this quite well. Perhaps that's precisely why so many truly unprecedented disasters are happening all around the world. Maybe what we are saying isn't entirely scientific. If it's not scientific, of course what we say doesn't really count for much. We're just making a supposition based on the Buddha's principle of good deeds bring good results, bad deeds bring bad results, this law of cause and effect. This isn't just something taught in Buddhism. Even figures like Marshall Chen Yi in China used to say the same thing. They also said that in this world, good deeds are rewarded and bad deeds are punished, and so on. When they educated people, they often spoke in this particular way as well. If these fundamental rules and guiding principles are indeed correct, then it is important to consider then the karma created by all of humanity is truly and profoundly different from what it was before. And the good karma that we collectively create may be much, much less than it used to be. Although there are now many convenient methods and technological advancements available, people today often spend their precious days lost in deep confusion, immersed in the pervasive grip of greed, anger, and ignorance, and caught up in an especially distracted state of mind. Because of this particular situation, for many, many people around the entire world, it is indeed becoming less and less common to practice virtuous deeds and actions. For example, in Tibet, in my own personal life experience, many practitioners 20 or 30 years ago were extremely diligent. But now, because of the internet and smartphones and all kinds of very convenient yet highly distracting conditions, many dedicated practitioners around me, myself most certainly included in many significant respects, whether in our own personal practice or diligent application compared to 20 years ago, have not only failed to make progress but have actually regressed in various ways. This is the honest truth, and it really is like this. In this way, it is said that among all things under heaven, human beings are the most precious. There are many diverse ways to interpret the profound idea that humans are indeed the most precious of all beings. Some individuals genuinely believe that among all living creatures, humans should rightfully be the masters, and therefore possess the inherent right to kill. Using this flawed reasoning, people consistently continue to inflate their own selfish desires and then proceed to kill all these other innocent living beings. What kind of significant consequences will people bring upon themselves as a direct result? Sometimes, perhaps, we truly need to reflect deeply on this. Take a moment to look at what we are doing right now. Is there any difference between what we do now and what we did before? Perhaps nowadays the skyscrapers we build everywhere are getting taller and taller. A building that was 10 stories high 10 years ago might now be 20 stories tall. Single-story houses from the past may have become 3 or 4-story buildings now. The floors we currently live on keep getting ever higher, but what about our moral character? Among all things in the world, virtue is the most precious. So has our virtue surpassed the height of our skyscrapers, or has it actually declined compared to when we lived in single-story houses? In that case, is humanity truly progressing or regressing? This is indeed something that many Buddhists and experienced experts alike can readily observe and consider. If some people think, it doesn't matter, and that our mindset, including filial piety culture, and even if our virtue keeps weakening and declining, it's really no big deal. As long as our material wealth keeps consistently increasing, that's also quite good. But on the other hand, if our spiritual virtue or our inherent conscience, kindness, and moral awareness keep significantly diminishing, then no matter how much material wealth you accumulate, can it truly bring us genuine and lasting happiness? Can it truly bring happiness to ourselves and to others? I'm not entirely so sure either, so I hope you all deeply consider it. Anyway, among all the many things under heaven, human beings are indeed the most precious. Remember that. Remember, what exactly does this profound mean? Of all human conduct, nothing is greater than filial piety. Among all human actions, none surpasses filial piety. Confucius also spoke about this. Among all human actions, what is the best? It is filial piety. So what exactly is filial piety? In fact, nothing is greater than respecting one's father. This so-called filial piety, because that was the culture at the time, indeed, there was truly nothing that surpassed the profound teachings about deeply respecting one's own father. This is because back then, and even now I suppose, one could genuinely have a very special respect and a deep sense of awe toward one's father. And truly nothing is greater for a strict and venerable father than being compared to the vast and boundless heaven. What is the greatest filial piety or the highest respect one can show to one's father? Here, compared to heaven, if we talk about being compared to heaven, after the father passes away, one performs certain rituals and ceremonies. They would follow the will of the gods, that is, the rituals, the rites of honoring heaven. If one performs these actions in the best possible way, this is the greatest form of respect and the highest honor one can show to one's father. If we were to give an illustrative example to demonstrate this, it would be like the Duke of Zhou. The Duke of Zhou truly achieved this remarkable feat, whether it was toward his own father, King Wen of Zhou, or toward all the revered ancestors of the Zhou family before his father. He performed excellent rituals and the very best ceremonies in this significant regard. So what is being discussed here? On one hand, we might wonder, how is it that among all human behaviors, filial piety is considered the most important? And within filial piety, the act of respecting one's father is especially significant. Not only should one show respect and reverence to him while he is alive, but even more importantly, after his passing, one must pay great attention to performing rituals in his honor. This is the highest form of filial piety, meaning that one should not only show deep and profound respect to one's cherished father during his entire lifetime, but also, after his passing, all of these significant things, perhaps most importantly, his teachings and the passing down of his legacy are also highly valued. These ancestral rites are taken very seriously. In fact, it could be said that in ancient times, it wasn't just when a person was alive, that people placed great importance on his teachings and the sense of reverence toward him. Even after a person departs from this world, he is still greatly and profoundly respected. It's similar to what we see today in many places, isn't it? For example, when our parents are alive, we treat them with great respect and filial piety. Once our parents have passed away, even now, whether it's for our dear parents or other family members, we devoutly recite scriptures for them. Even many, many years after their passing, we still dedicate merits to them. This is something found in Buddhism. In fact, in some ways, these practices are quite similar to what is described here. For us ordinary people, for example, when someone unfortunately passes away, if that individual made truly significant contributions to society or to a particular ethnic group, then after their death, we might erect a suitable monument for them. Then, after 10 years or on the anniversary of their passing, we hold ceremonies each and every time, which are essentially like Dharma assemblies. Sometimes, for example, we have special memorial Dharma assemblies for His Holiness. As His disciples, this is actually a form of ritual offering. What was referred to as ritual offerings in Confucianism at the time may not necessarily be the same as the way we conduct Buddhist rituals. For example, for a truly devoted and loyal disciple of our esteemed lineage masters, after their own beloved master passes away every single year thereafter, in order to express profound remembrance and heartfelt gratitude for their master's immense kindness, they will hold ceremonies of this kind on different occasions. Therefore, we also shouldn't think that performing rituals is just feudal superstition, something from over 2,500 years ago, and that we would absolutely never do such things now, since we are living in the 21st century. Some young people nowadays truly think this particular way. Because they may have studied abroad or attended university, young people only see the present moment and cannot truly see the past. So, as for the culture of the past, they have never truly reflected on it or studied it in depth. So whenever something differs from their current way of life, they immediately reject it all outright. This particular approach truly shows a clear lack of experience and wisdom. So as we study the culture of filial piety this time, sometimes it may not be exactly the same as our current way of life, or indeed the way we live now. But just because something is different, we shouldn't assume it's unreasonable. Perhaps if it's different, it's simply because we don't understand it ourselves. Sometimes when I visit Western countries, I truly feel this deeply. Many of their life philosophies are completely different from ours. But just because something is different, we have no reason to reject it. If we choose to reject it ourselves, perhaps we wouldn't even be able to fully explain our very own reasoning to them. If we use an Eastern way of thinking to reject it, that might not necessarily be entirely correct either. So nowadays, it is quite evident that most people's cultural education is indeed significantly influenced by Western culture. But is this reasonable or unreasonable? We should carefully observe first and not rush to judge. Let's take a look first and foremost. So this way of saying things here is actually telling us what? That among all things in heaven and earth, people are very important. But among human behaviors, filial piety is very important. And within filial piety, honoring the teachings of one's father is very important. Honoring one's father is not only important while he is alive, but even more so after he has passed away, when he is joined with heaven. This joining with heaven can be understood in different ways. It could truly be said to be a profound way of remembering his enduring spirit. Commemorating his rich culture is not only something found exclusively in religion, but actually even in today's world this also exists. For example, this year marks the 200th anniversary of Marx's birth. At that time, all Marxists also held meetings for him, organized some activities to remember his life. So if after a person dies, we don't care about anything, in other words, if it's really true that when a person dies, it's like a lamp going out, then his spirit might also truly die. In that case, what's the point of us holding ceremonies to bow to him or offering wreaths? What meaning does all of this indeed have? Because he's already gone, he's no longer there to receive these offerings. Sometimes our human behavior seems a bit ridiculous, especially some practices of those who don't believe in past and future lives, who don't acknowledge the existence of his soul at all, yet still go to his grave to offer wreaths and burn paper. During Qingming Festival, on the one hand, people don't acknowledge. When I went to Dongbei University of Finance and Economics, there was a teacher who said, nowadays, we don't believe in heaven, we only believe in the existence of ghosts. He also shared some stories about Qingming Festival. Sometimes when you think about it, it's actually true. So sometimes as human beings, some of our current practices also truly need to be carefully examined with wisdom. So perhaps when a person is alive and present, we pay a great deal of attention to their spirit, their unique culture, and their valuable teachings. But what's even more important is that once this truly important person leaves this world, we often value their profound teachings even more. For example, our precious spiritual guru has already left this world this year, and this winter will mark the 15th anniversary. The guru's physical form has already departed from this world, but his enduring spirit and profound wisdom will always never leave us. We often use phrases like never apart, never forgotten, never abandoned, never dispersed, and so on. We express it in this particular way, and this expression is certainly not something empty or meaningless. We believe that he truly exists in a vivid and living way. Whether it is his wisdom or his spirit, both still profoundly exist. Sometimes we also need to observe this particular approach ourselves. Otherwise, people nowadays do often find themselves in a state of contradiction indeed. On one hand, it seems like we are doubting yet acknowledging something at the same time, but on the other hand, our thoughts and actions are sometimes not very consistent with each other. It may go against the trend. So he said here that this is just like Zhougong. What is Zhougong like below? He said here, in ancient times, the Duke of Zhou performed the boundary sacrifice to Hoji, matching him with heaven, and he performed the ancestral sacrifice to King Wen in the Bright Hall, matching him with the Lord. So what actually is the Duke of Zhou like? In former times, the Duke of Zhou performed the rite in the suburbs, that is to say, out in the open, or perhaps at a circular mound or some similar location. As a descendant of the Zhou family, he offered sacrifice to the earliest ancestors of the Zhou lineage. He is here, Hoji is matched with the sky. He performed sacrifices to the ancestors of the Zhou family. According to the gods, whether in a way that pleased them or in a way that suited them, he performed the rituals. He truly did that. And as for ancestral worship, he also had to offer sacrifices to King Wen of Zhou. The sacrifices to King Wen of Zhou were typically held in a Ming hall. In that place, he was also paired with the supreme deity. The supreme deity here is not necessarily the god referred to in Christianity. Here, the supreme deity refers to the gods of the five directions, east, south, west, north, and center, each with different deities. Depending on the solar terms and the different directions, these deities all play their roles. He acted according to their wishes. The Duke of Zhou was actually the son of King Wen of Zhou. It is said that King Wen of Zhou, perhaps we've mentioned this particular point before, according to some ancient legends, King Wen of Zhou was believed to have had 100 sons. But in actual history, it seems there were only a dozen or so, as we mentioned earlier. One of them was the revered Duke of Zhou, and another was the esteemed King Wu of Zhou. After King Wu of Zhou died, King Cheng of Zhou was still very young at the time. But the Duke of Zhou did not seize his rightful position by force. He first performed the proper rituals for King Wen of Zhou. He conducted these significant rituals at the Ming Tang, as mentioned earlier. Then, as for himself, it could be said that he did a great deal for King Cheng of Zhou's royal throne. He diligently relied on his own formidable strength to quell various disturbances and rebellions across the entire land. Later, as King Cheng gradually grew up and matured, he respectfully returned King Wu's supreme authority to him. It seems that the young king was called King Cheng of Zhou, and in the end he stabilized his rule over the kingdom. But at this time, what did the Duke of Zhou do? One significant thing was that he deeply honored his father and all of his ancestors. He meticulously performed the proper rituals and ceremonies for them. He was certainly not ungrateful or indifferent. Indeed, he was never like that at all. Another crucial thing is that for the sake of acquiring power, he did not. In fact, he had the ability, but he did not seize power. Instead, he quietly and diligently did many important things behind the scenes. So, according to some of Confucius's profound ideas, he held the Duke of Zhou in special esteem. He was his idol. You could say he was the person Confucius respected the most in his heart. When he referred to a sage, as most of the time he meant the Duke of Zhou, he thought the Duke of Zhou was truly remarkable, especially in how he treated his elders, whether it was his father or his father's father. He was always very filial to all his ancestors. He was extremely filial. Moreover, whether it was toward the living common people or his own younger brothers, he accomplished many truly great things for them as well. He did not seize power for his own benefit. It wasn't like that. So at that time, the Duke of Zhou seemed to be the most important figure in the Zhou dynasty. What we now commonly call the rites of Zhou also originated directly from him. The true and authentic Zhou dynasty probably began with King Wu of Zhou. He successfully overthrew the previous Shang dynasty, and then the powerful King Wu of Zhou began to establish the glorious Zhou dynasty. It seems that the Duke of Zhou was not the founder of the Zhou dynasty, but in reality he was still an extremely important and influential figure within the Zhou dynasty. That's precisely why Confucius always deeply revered the Duke of Zhou. If you want to be filial, you should be like the Duke of Zhou. He also performed excellent and proper rituals for his ancestors, and he conducted appropriate rituals for his own father as well. Actually, if you look at this from the perspective of some later generations, placing such importance on the death of one's parents and the inheritance from one's parents is very important. Otherwise, in some places nowadays, it seems that when the parents are alive, no one cares about them at all. But as soon as they hear that their parents are about to die, just to divide up the inheritance, The children come from all directions. When they arrive, they just wait for their parents to take their last breath. And the parents tragically die with their eyes wide open, feeling extremely heartbroken and devastated. Back when they were sick, back when they were suffering the most, they were extremely lonely, with no one coming to visit them. But now, as soon as they are about to leave this world, some parents are unwilling to give their valuable property to their very own children, even when they are in great need. Before dying, they write a will to distribute their assets, donating to a charity or to other worthy causes or to individuals, sometimes even to people who are not very close to them, but who are especially caring and loving around them. They deliberately leave some of their personal property to these specific individuals. Such things also happen in today's society, don't they? But in reality, we should always have a profound sense of gratitude toward our parents. I think from the perspective of us Buddhists, if we show proper respect to our esteemed teachers and to the sacred lineage of our revered teachers, it's not only important to follow their teachings while they are alive, but after they eventually leave this earthly world, their profound wisdom and boundless compassion and their altruistic spirit should continue to be passed down without interruption. This is the greatest form of respect and the highest form of filial piety toward one's teacher. In some of the teachings of His Holiness, he also said that the only way to repay the kindness of one's teacher is to benefit sentient beings. In fact, by that time, your teacher may have already left this world, but if you want to repay their kindness, you should continue to benefit sentient beings even now. As mentioned earlier, at that time he was so devoted. So in this way, within the 4 seas, there were many feudal lords and many officials. Each of them participated in his sacrificial ceremonies according to their respective positions. If, like the sacrifices to King Wen of Zhou, he performed such ceremonies for his own father and for the revered ancestors and respected elders who came before him, then people of all different statuses, coming from the east, south, west, north, and indeed all corners of the land, would all come together to participate. For people in ancient times, this was truly very important. In fact, even from our modern perspective today, it is still profoundly very important. Everyone has a different status, and people of different statuses may come to observe. Nowadays, so-called differences in status are mostly about power or money. For example, how much does a bureau chief earn? How much does a deputy bureau chief earn? Then how much does a section chief earn? How about a deputy section chief? And then it goes down level by level. Of course, above the bureau chief, there are even higher positions. In many places today, including some in the West, it's the same way. There are many levels of official positions. They are often divided based on their money and power. In ancient times, an individual's status was actually determined by their position, identity, and even their clothing. It also included one's moral character. You see, in this context, in fact, everyone held different positions, right? With different positions, when they participated in activities at the time, there were different requirements, but these requirements were not necessarily about money. They should be participation methods that were carefully matched and perfectly suited to their respective statuses. That was indeed the precise way they participated. So sometimes when people are being measured in terms of their status or their rank, if it's only about power and money, that might not necessarily be right. There should be a standard of virtue to measure by. That might be more reasonable. So sometimes, according to some Western ideas, everyone should be equal. But this equality, well, you could say that everyone is equal. Especially now, when children go to study in the West and come back, they say, parents are the same as us, teachers are the same as us. We are all equal, but sometimes it's not complete equality. People's ages aren't equal either, and wisdom isn't equal, nor is good fortune. Looks aren't equal, and neither is height. So sometimes I really do want to debate with some of the students about this particular topic. They say, now we must have peace, we must have equality, we are all equal. But everyone being equal, well, you can say that in words. In reality, things truly aren't equal. Abilities aren't equal either. For example, when we were in middle school, there were a dozen or so of us, a dozen or so people, and many wanted to get in. But in the end, good fortune wasn't equal, so most people couldn't make it. At that time, there were 17 or 18 of us. Only 3 of us got into the teachers' college. The other 15 or so, if I count, I could get the exact number. Later, some people were really quite upset about it. In many respects, Western culture is very good in some ways. Things like so-called democracy and equality are truly great and important. But we can't just say, in that case, and apply it to everything. For example, between my father and me, are we really completely equal? Or between the head teacher and me, are we really equal? In what ways are we actually equal? Our experience isn't equal, and our wisdom isn't equal either. Even our salaries aren't equal. Look at students and teachers. For example, some teachers in the West have very high salaries, how much they make in a year. But students not only don't get paid, they even have to pay the school. Is that truly equality? So sometimes, if we overemphasize the concept of equality, we might only achieve equality in certain specific areas. If we really want to talk about genuine equality, then we need to consider all aspects. Our lives are equal, and our capacity to feel pain and happiness is equal. Humans and animals are equal too, but in what fundamental way are we truly equal? It profoundly fears death, and I too genuinely fear death. If a sharp knife is pressed to the neck, I would certainly feel intense pain, and so would it. But for important educational reasons, this crucial aspect is basically never discussed. So often when we talk about so-called equality, we talk about equality in areas that are actually unequal. And then in areas where we should talk about equality, we ignore them and say nothing. In this regard, humans are seen as having complete dominion. All things in the world are in our hands. We can change the world at will and destroy all things. Is this way of thinking reasonable? I hope everyone will consider it. Here it says that each should perform their own role in the ritual. If each performs their own role, then everyone truly has a distinctly different position and a unique identity. Each and every one of us, although we, for example, in our institute, the teacher has said before many things are equal, and at that time it was required that in Always Remembering, or one of those texts, His Holiness spoke about 3 kinds of equality. Of course, the expectations for everyone are equal, but in reality, each person's merit is not equal. Health is also unequal, and so is appearance. So there are many, many inequalities, especially in our karma. If our karma is unequal, then our experiences are also unequal. For example, when we attend a class, most people feel, oh, today was enjoyable. But for those with different karma, they feel, oh, today was really hard to get through. They think, hurry up and finish. I want to leave. You see, just now, some people, because of unequal karma, left right away. They don't even have the time to sit through a single class. So I truly think this is due to unequal karma. Now let's talk about the next important topic. What exactly should we discuss? How can the virtue of a sage surpass filial piety? In what particular way can the profound virtue of a true sage truly transcend this earthly realm? Is there anything that surpasses filial piety? Can it go beyond filial piety? Is there such a thing? Here the answer is no. Why not? He says, therefore, being raised at the knees of one's parents, one should serve and care for them daily with respect. The filial piety mentioned here is nothing other than wisdom and compassion. Here it should mean love, whether it's affection or compassion. So where does this love originate? It is born at the knees, meaning when a child is young, the love that is part of filial piety arises during the child's very early years, when the child is still very small, not even quite reaching the parents' knees yet. Indeed, this is what we call infancy or early childhood. At this time, education is very important for the child. Nowadays, many scientists and anthropologists all believe that the ages from 1 to 7 are also a very important stage for education. So during this stage, generally speaking in the past, the mother was the most important educator for the child. If the mother is loving, then the child will have love. So the child's love also comes from the parents, and it should start at home from the youngest age. Then, as the child gradually grows up, their profound love for their beloved parents becomes even deeper and truly increases day by day. So whether it's their heartfelt love or their growing wisdom, as they get older, the way parents thoughtfully educate and carefully guide them also significantly changes. Or the education instilled in them is gradually improved and perfected over time. So the education received during childhood is very important and crucial. But regarding this importance, nowadays I see that many children at home spend every day just learning knowledge, learning English, learning to draw, learning to play the piano. Every day they are just being pushed in terms of skills. But in reality, they are not truly learning virtues or learning about love. In fact, this is not happening at all. According to some views in traditional culture, at this stage, children should be taught not to be too selfish. Nowadays, many children, for example, if you are supposed to give them something and you don't give it to them, they will cry loudly. And when they cry, the parents say, oh, baby, don't cry, I'll satisfy you. They buy this toy, buy that toy, always giving in to the child. If they grow up like this, then in the future, whenever they can't get something in the world, they will immediately respond with anger and resentment. So sometimes, if from a young age children do not receive a more moderate kind of care and are completely indulged, this becomes an educational problem for many people nowadays. Many parents today are especially indulgent toward their children. As long as the child cries, their wishes are fulfilled. But when they grow up, whether it's in their work or relationships, when problems arise, they just cry loudly. But at that time, will anyone satisfy you? No. By then, your parents are already gone. When your parents were still alive, you could cry loudly whenever you needed something. But after you grow up, you think that in this world, as long as you want something, as long as you need something, for example, if you experience a breakup, you just cry and wail. But does crying help? No, it doesn't. The person is already gone. And when you truly fail at work, does crying really help? No, it absolutely doesn't. So at this particular point, it really does become a significant regret in life. Nowadays, a great deal of education is like this because perhaps the parents themselves, as long as the child simply doesn't cry, that's entirely enough. They just give the child whatever they want, thinking that's a form of love. But actually, I think this kind of love is a mistaken one. If you always go along with everything they want, maybe when they grow up, this world does not completely follow his will. The people surrounding him should ideally be strangers, unfamiliar individuals. It certainly shouldn't be like his own parents. That particular time might indeed be far more emotionally painful. The sage, through strictness, teaches reverence, and through affection teaches love. Using the strictness, reverence, and love shown towards the father as the basis to teach others respect and awe. And kin refers to the mother, using the reason of a mother's love. So in this particular way, we can effectively teach others how to truly love. Relying deeply on the profound wisdom of my beloved father and the gentle compassion of my dear mother, he himself has this kind of wisdom and compassion of his parents. To teach others about this profound kind of love, then the sacred words of the saints, the teachings of the great sages are truly accomplished without solemnity. It is not really extremely stern, nor is it extremely cold at all in any way. It is not done in this particular manner. His unique way of teaching truly carries a certain inherent virtue. He consistently wins people over with his virtue and not by any forceful means. The sage does not immediately sentence someone to death after they break the law. He does not immediately behead them or cut off their limbs. It is not like that. Moreover, their governance is effective without being severe. There is no need for extremely severe punishments. Often, in some places around the world, everything is suppressed by force. Otherwise, whether facing such widespread resistance from the populace or political instability, everything is handled solely through the use of military force. Even now, many countries around the world are still like this. But in actual fact, this particular approach is not very good. From a young age, everyone should receive an education rooted in love. Everyone should receive an education based on compassion. Then in all our schools and within the minds of many of their parents, if there is such an education of love, then whether it's governing a country or managing a family, it becomes much easier. If this is lacking and everything relies solely on other forms of harsh punishment, especially in ancient times, the brutal methods of torture employed by various countries throughout history were truly terrifying and utterly inhumane. For example, when we look at some countries, including some European nations, if their powerful monarchs were even slightly displeased at that particular time, they would swiftly execute everyone, indeed, behead them all. Nowadays, perhaps because the entire world is much more transparent, at least some matters take into account the credibility of humanity. One reason is that many people are paying more attention to these issues. Perhaps in many countries, especially those located in Africa, things used to be extremely inhumane and truly terrible, but now they might be a little bit better. But no matter what, if we truly uphold things with a father's wisdom and a mother's loving care, this is a method of teaching used by sages, and this method of teaching by sages actually doesn't require any extremely harsh policies or very severe punishments. In fact, sometimes the Buddhist approach we use is really very good. For example, in our Lorong Valley, there are several thousand people. Now, with thousands of people here, if we didn't have the Buddhist education of love, no matter how many staff members or even law enforcement officers we had, even if they were pointing guns at people all day, it would probably still be very difficult. But because everyone here has the mindset of Mahayana Buddhism, we naturally don't need any special or extraordinary laws here. Everyone is inherently self-disciplined and adheres to a strong moral code. In some traditional Mahayana Buddhist monasteries, for example, we can't say that everything is 100% perfect. There may still be some who fall short or don't follow the rules, but these are very rare cases, a tiny minority. But compared to other religions, other groups without any faith at all, or even those who do have faith, but belong to groups whose beliefs are much more extreme and radical. In comparison, those with Mahayana Buddhist beliefs might be considerably easier to manage and guide. This management approach is not entirely based on strict enforcement, but rather on a deep sense of self-awareness, whether it's the love from parents since childhood, or the caring guidance from teachers along the way, or perhaps some other forms. I think sometimes the teachers in our schools are crying all day because the students don't listen. It's like this every day. But among the Dharma teachers in each class, I haven't seen that happen. There was one time when a Dharma teacher cried quite a lot, but it seemed that what she was crying about wasn't even a big deal. At the time, maybe the Dharma teacher's heart wasn't in great condition. So, as a group, comparatively speaking, we humans, whether East or West, can be compared in this way. Even among the lay practitioners in our Buddhist community are there disputes. There certainly are. Sometimes I say, do you have even more disputes than people without faith? But sometimes, indeed, those who have faith, those who have self-discipline and right understanding and mindfulness can still be governed with leniency and order is maintained. So what is the reason for this? The root cause lies in the origin. So what exactly is the main thing it truly relies upon? Its foundation is indeed morality. That's why in many current cases of management nowadays, sometimes when our dedicated volunteers here are really not listening, you give them a bit of a teaching, explain the reason to them. In fact, sometimes reason goes far beyond punishment. For example, what are some management methods used by companies now? If you're 3 minutes late, you get 3 when deducted. There are many written rules. Of course, most laws and some rules actually come from the West, because many Western countries are governed by the rule of law. In the past, the East used morality as a standard, while the West used laws as a standard. Now, most Easterners are using this Western approach. They use laws for this and rules for that. Without rules, nothing can be accomplished. So now there are all these regulations and restrictions. But sometimes these rules and restrictions can be very important for certain people. But what's even more important is everyone should maintain a calm and peaceful attitude toward both those above and those below them. This is the best way to manage things. Sometimes I am especially grateful for some of our fellow practitioners here. You could say that we have lived together for 20 or 30 years now. But between us, have we ever had issues with management or regulations? There have been some conflicts at times, yes, a little bit. But compared to other places like some companies or other social groups, if I were a manager in those situations, I might have already become quite fed up and left by now. But in reality, many of us have our own strong sense of morality. We have our own self-discipline, and that is more important than anything else. So the root cause lies in this foundation, and this foundation is very important. In the future, if Buddhists can have their own self-restraint, perhaps that is the best way. Today is still okay, I can say a bit more. Next, the way of father and son is natural, and so is the righteousness between ruler and subject. So the relationship between father and child is actually innate. It is to say, it is a principle that fits the natural laws of heaven, earth, and all things. Because between father and child, parents must have a kind of love for their children. They must be especially compassionate toward them. And children should have a sense of respect and awe toward their parents. Nowadays, many people no longer have this. Actually, this is the best kind of natural law. It's just like the relationship between ruler and subject, which is also the righteousness between ruler and subject. But does this still exist now? In many places, including Western countries, the way between father and son basically no longer exists. People believe in equality. Then is the way between ruler and subject equal? It is still not equal. Look at the president of a country and those below him. Are the powers and responsibilities between the Senate and other governmental leaders truly equal? And then the Senate, the House of Representatives, and the leaders of various provinces and cities, including ordinary citizens, are they equal? They are not equal. Even in very democratic countries, it is still not equal. In fact, this is true regardless of whether it's the East or the West. If you have a sense of respect and awe toward your parents, then you will naturally have the same feeling toward your leaders. Moreover, leaders should have a sense of love and compassion toward their subordinates. These two relationships are very important. Nowadays, in fact, from a young age, we are often disrespectful to our parents. For some children, it even seems completely normal to hit their parents. From a very young age, even before they can stand, they are already slapping their parents. This is a very bad habit. Sometimes I see some children when they are still very little, if they get a little upset, like when they don't get a toy or a phone, because nowadays many children are especially fond of playing with mobile phones, watching all sorts of random and messy cartoons on them. And if you don't give it to them, even just for a moment, they start hitting their parents. If this continues, when they grow up, after their parents have passed away, they might want to hit their boss instead. However, if you were to physically hit your boss, you would just get fired. That particular habit, unfortunately, still remains. The principle of ruler and subject is perhaps unavoidable. In every country, the ruler is very important. And in a company, the person in charge is also very important. No matter what kind of group it is, I've been to many places, and basically it's the same everywhere. The main person in charge always plays an important role in every place. If you absolutely cannot comply with these important guidelines, then your own personal outcome will truly not be very good at all. So when we look at this particular situation with parents, I actually think it makes sense. If children are taught from a young age to have a sense of respect and awe toward their parents, and their parents truly love them so very much, relationship between ruler and subject is the same. Subordinates have respect and awe to their superior. No matter leader says, "Oh, he is the leader." But we can't just dismiss what he says with, "What does he know? What does he know?" If you always speak in that tone, then in the end, things probably won't go well for you, and you won't be able to become an official yourself. You won't be an ordinary citizen either, and in the end, you'll just be miserable. Parents give us life. There is truly nothing greater than continuing the family line. So the upbringing provided by parents actually plays a crucial and significant role in the growth of their children. The most important thing is the continuation of the family line, that is, passing on the family name. Or in other words, the reproduction of descendants, ensuring the continuation of the family line. This is indeed the most profoundly important thing, isn't it? Even in today's society, a significant number of people still place a very special and deeply rooted importance on this fundamental concept, especially Chinese people who have always wanted to continue the family line. It seems to be valued even more significantly than in many other places, but it truly is very important. No matter what, this is the most fundamentally important thing. In the past, the esteemed Lianzong Baojian from the sacred Mount Lu explicitly stated, whether it's continuing the family line or being truly filial to one's parents, there are indeed two distinct kinds. One is for monastics and the other is for lay people. For lay people, of course, what we now call filial piety. For monastics, it means practicing diligently themselves and then gradually guiding their parents onto the right path. This is a way for monastics to continue the family line. But nowadays, many people, probably most, don't consider this valid. Including when someone in the family becomes a monastic, people often feel embarrassed about it. But in reality, even if no one in the family becomes a monastic, I see that many young people are pretty much the same as monastics. Because speaking globally, this is the case everywhere now. Especially in China, many prominent experts are on television every single day commenting, saying that the marriage rate is getting lower and lower, while the divorce rate is getting higher and higher. The birth rate is getting lower and lower. Because nowadays, many young people are increasingly unwilling to get married and truly don't want to face the significant pressures of modern life. So, some elders persistently keep urging and pressuring them to get married over and over again. I've heard that now. Many young people don't even dare to go home during the new year, fearing the inevitable questions and expectations. Because all their aunts and uncles start nagging them every day. That's why many young people don't want to go home for the new year. Some even rent a friend, a boyfriend or girlfriend to bring home. How much is the rent? I've heard that there are even some companies now where you can rent someone during the new year to show your parents. My friend is like this, just to give their parents a temporary explanation. Then after a while, they might explain it to them in another way. But what exactly is this, really? It has just become a deeply ingrained habit, I suppose, for me. No matter how much you urge or talk about it now, the truth is young people are mostly unwilling to accept the so-called traditional marriage and having children. If things go on like this, it's very likely that, I don't know if you've seen it, but I've come across some analyses. Some experts are particularly worried about this. Now, with the aging population becoming more and more serious, and young people are going to, if there are no descendants, what will things really become in the future? Because a few years ago, as everyone knows, especially in places like China, many areas had family planning policies. But now it seems that in some cities, they're encouraging people to have children by offering different benefits, like a certain amount of infant formula or other essential things. People who originally didn't want to have children, they're not necessarily going to have kids just for some formula. So now with some of these benefits, it's hard to say how effective they are. I'm not really sure. Although, as monastics, we don't really care about these things. Sometimes there are certain issues within society that people care about a great deal, and we can't help but think about them in the future. It's possible that most people will become like monastics, even if they haven't actually ordained. If society becomes like that, then not only will there be dissatisfaction with monastics, but there will also be differing opinions about lay people. So, as everyone knows, in Europe and America, especially in Europe, when you go there, you can really feel how serious their aging population is. Japan is the same way. So now there are many issues around the world that have never happened before on this earth, in this world. And these are indeed new and complex problems as well. They continue to keep emerging, and as they frequently appear, when humanity truly has to face them, it can be rather awkward indeed and quite challenging to overcome. So here, especially in the East, the profound idea that there is truly nothing greater than continuing the precious life given by one's parents is indeed very important. Of course, this can certainly be interpreted in several different ways. As for my own explanation, indeed, what I just mentioned lacks a lineage or tradition. Mainly, I have not received the classic of filial piety from a teacher in person. So I'm relying on my own understanding, and there isn't a Tibetan version either. If there were a Tibetan translation, easier to understand, for example, the Vimalakirti Sutra, if there were a Tibetan version, then perhaps some explanations here. Surely many experts, those who specialize in studying and researching the classic of filial piety, might see what I'm doing as showing off my limited skills before real masters. But I think they probably won't come to listen anyway, so it's fine. Because there are many different ways to interpret it. I've seen a lot of commentaries on the classic of filial piety. I've read some of them, but among these, I've basically read most of them before. And there are many different interpretations. So here, I'm relying on my own understanding. In our Tibetan culture, there's a saying, speech without lineage is unreliable, and a disciple without a teacher cannot attain realization. That's the saying. So, without a lineage, what I say may not necessarily be correct. If it's incorrect, I hope you can accept what is right. Or if your own wisdom uncovers something and you share it with me, I would be happy to accept it as well. Because there are some areas where I also lack understanding, some principles, including some of the content that comes later, which can possibly be interpreted in two different ways. There are such cases. Also, the time is rather short. I'm not sure if my explanations here are reasonable or not. If they're not reasonable, I also repent before Confucius. All right, that's all for today.
Sonandai tamse thobanya tonani de jana pase kirgana jirano chupai jupun zonen droa droa
bandangara badna Sodargye bandangara badna Sodargye bandangara badna Sodargye